This is a fascinating story where history, faith, and archaeology all intersect.
The new discoveries here at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and around the tomb of Jesus. The Gospel account in the book of John that describes Calvary and the site of Jesus' burial.
October 26th, Jerusalem. Inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a team of scientists carefully lifts marble slabs that have sealed one of Christianity's holiest sites for over 400 years. Hours pass, days pass, and then, just minutes before the tomb is to be resealed, they uncover it the original limestone burial bed, untouched for centuries.
Underneath here is what is believed to be the holy bed, the limestone rock shelf in which the crucified body of Jesus lay.
But that's only the beginning. 2 years later, beneath layers of stone and earth, another discovery stops the team in their tracks. A perfectly preserved garden, complete with olive trees, grapevines, and tombs carved directly into bedrock, exactly as described in the Gospels. For skeptics, a challenge. For believers, a validation. And for the world, a question we can no longer ignore. Could the stories written 2,000 years ago be more real than we ever imagined? The moment of discovery. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre has stood in Jerusalem's Old City for nearly 17 centuries, marking what Christians believe is the site of Jesus' crucifixion, burial, and resurrection. Inside the church sits a small shrine called the Edicule, a structure rebuilt multiple times over the centuries, most recently in 1810 after a devastating fire. Within that shrine lies what tradition holds is the burial bed, where Jesus' body was laid after the crucifixion. But by 2016, the Edicule was in serious danger. The structure was deteriorating.
The renovations have been ongoing since 2016. The burial chapel has already been renovated.
Held together partially by metal supports installed by British authorities in 1947, experts warned it could collapse. The decision was made to conduct a complete restoration, the first comprehensive work on the shrine in over 200 years. That's when the National Technical University of Athens was brought in, led by conservation experts who specialized in preserving ancient structures. Their mission was straightforward: stabilize the shrine, document everything, and ensure the site would last for future generations. But to do that properly, they needed to see what was actually beneath the marble cladding that had covered the burial bed since at least 1555. On the night of the 26th of October 2016, after receiving permission from the 3 major Christian denominations that share custody of the church, the team began carefully removing the marble slabs. This wasn't just archaeological work. This was deeply sensitive, performed with representatives from the Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Armenian Apostolic churches watching closely. The initial removal revealed fill material, seemingly random stone and rubble used to level the surface when the marble was installed centuries ago. Hours passed with nothing but debris. The team worked through the night, then through the next day, racing against a deadline. The religious authorities had agreed to a limited window for the investigation. The tomb had to be resealed by October 28th, just 60 hours after opening. As time ran short, the team wondered if they would find anything at all. Then, beneath the fill, they discovered another marble slab, this one older, etched with a faint cross. It appeared to date from the Crusader period, perhaps the 12th century. They carefully removed it. And there, just before the deadline, they saw it. Limestone. Original limestone. The burial bed that historical texts described but many scholars thought had been destroyed. Frederick Hebert, National Geographic's archaeologist in residence who was documenting the project.
We heard about this, and I heard about it, and it was, as National Geographic's archaeologist on staff,
Stood over the exposed rock in disbelief. His knees were shaking. He hadn't expected this. For decades, scholars questioned whether anything original remained at the site. The church had been destroyed completely in 1009 by the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, then rebuilt. Before that, it had suffered damage from fires, earthquakes, and conflicts. The assumption was that the original burial bed, if it ever existed at this location, had been lost to history. But here it was, visible, tangible, real. The team couldn't say with absolute certainty that this was the exact spot where Jesus was laid, but the limestone bed appeared to be in its original location, undisturbed, despite everything that had happened above it over the centuries. The surprises continued. When the team examined the walls of the edicule, they found that the ancient limestone cave walls were still standing, hidden behind later construction. They carefully cut a small window into the southern interior wall of the shrine, revealing part of the original rock surface. Professor Antonia Moropoulou, chief scientific supervisor of the restoration, called it,
It's my pleasure to ask Professor Antonia Moropoulou, the Vice Rector.
However, I would like to focus on some issues.
the holy rock that has been revered for centuries but only now could actually be seen. The discovery sent waves through both academic and religious communities. Here was physical evidence that the site venerated for nearly 2,000 years might actually be authentic. But questions remained. How could they be sure this was really the tomb of Jesus? What evidence connected this specific location to the events described in the Gospels? The answers would come from multiple directions, piecing together archaeology, history, and ancient texts into a picture that became harder and harder to dismiss. But before we could understand the significance of the tomb itself, researchers needed to verify that this location matched what the Bible actually described about Jesus' burial. And that's where the historical detective work began, connecting ancient Roman records, Jewish burial customs, and gospel accounts into a timeline that pointed to one unavoidable conclusion: tracing the evidence. The Gospels provide specific details about Jesus' burial. According to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, after the crucifixion, Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy follower, asked Pilate for Jesus' body. Joseph then placed the body in his own tomb, a new tomb carved from rock in a garden near the crucifixion site. The tomb was located outside Jerusalem's city walls, in accordance with Jewish law that prohibited burials within the city. These details might seem like minor narrative elements, but they're actually crucial for verification. And remarkably, they all check out. First, the type of tomb. Archaeologists have found over 1,000 rock-cut tombs around Jerusalem, dating to the 1st century. These tombs were carved directly into limestone, with long niches called loculi, where bodies were laid. This was exactly how wealthy Jews buried their dead during that period. The design was distinctive, expensive, and required significant labor. It wasn't something done hastily or for common burials. Dr. Jody Magnus, an archaeologist and National Geographic grantee, confirmed that while this doesn't prove the gospel account as historical fact, it does demonstrate that whoever wrote those stories understood the burial customs of that era accurately. Second, the location outside the city walls. Jewish tradition absolutely forbade burials inside Jerusalem's boundaries. The dead were considered ritually unclean, and bringing them within the city would violate religious law. The Gospels specifically state that Jesus was crucified and buried outside the walls, near a place called Golgotha. But here's what makes this detail so important. Shortly after Jesus' death, Jerusalem expanded. New walls were built, and areas that had been outside the city were now inside. This means that by the time the Gospels were written decades later, Golgotha and the tomb were within the city. Yet the Gospel writers correctly identified them as being outside the walls at the time of the crucifixion. This isn't the kind of detail someone fabricating a story would know to include. It's the kind of specific, verifiable information that comes from eyewitness accounts or careful historical record. The location of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre fits this description perfectly. Archaeological excavations have confirmed that in Jesus' time, this area was outside the city walls and used as a cemetery. Third, the historical chain of custody for the site. In AD 325, nearly 3 centuries after Jesus' death, Roman Emperor Constantine sent representatives to Jerusalem to locate the tomb of Christ. They were directed to a specific location, a spot where a Roman temple stood. That temple had been built by Emperor Hadrian around AD 135, nearly 200 years earlier. Why would Hadrian build a temple on this particular spot? Historical sources, including the early church historian Eusebius, suggest that Hadrian built it specifically to suppress Christian worship at the site. He knew Christians considered this location sacred, so he erected a pagan temple over it, possibly to erase Christian memory. But ironically, this act of suppression became an act of preservation. By building over the site, Hadrian marked it, ensuring that future generations would know exactly where it was. When Constantine's men arrived in 325, they demolished Hadrian's temple and excavated beneath it. According to Eusebius, they found a rock-cut tomb. Constantine ordered the cave ceiling cut away so the tomb would be visible, and he built a church around it to protect and honor the site. That church, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, became one of Christianity's most important pilgrimage destinations. The church Constantine built didn't survive intact. It was destroyed in 1009, then rebuilt in the mid-11th century. But 20th century excavations inside the church uncovered remnants of both Hadrian's Roman temple and Constantine's original church structure. More importantly, archaeologists found evidence of the ancient limestone quarry that had existed at the site, along with at least 6 other rock-cut tombs in the surrounding area, some still visible today. Dr. Magnus emphasized the significance of these additional tombs. Their presence is important archaeological evidence that this area was indeed a Jewish cemetery outside Jerusalem's walls in the time of Jesus. This matters because it supports every aspect of the gospel description. A rock-cut tomb, owned by a wealthy man, located in a garden, situated outside the city walls, near the site of crucifixion. Dan Bahat, former city archaeologist of Jerusalem, weighed in on the authenticity question. While we may not be absolutely certain that the Holy Sepulchre is the site of Jesus' burial, we certainly have no other site that can lay a claim nearly as weighty, and we really have no reason to reject the authenticity of the site. After the 2016 discovery, the burial bed was documented extensively before being resealed beneath its original marble covering. Professor Moropoulou emphasized that the conservation work was intended to last forever, meaning the limestone might not be visible again for centuries. But archaeologist Martin Biddle, who published a major study on the tomb in 1999, believes the key to understanding the site lies in examining the rock surface itself. He pointed to graffiti, crosses, and inscriptions carved into stone by early pilgrims, found on other rock-cut tombs in the area. These marks show that people in the early centuries of Christianity recognized certain tombs as sacred. Biddle argued that the surfaces of the rock must be looked at with the greatest care for traces of graffiti. The issue is absolutely crucial. We know that there are at least half a dozen other rock-cut tombs below various parts of the church. So why did Bishop Eusebius identify this tomb as the tomb of Christ? He doesn't say, and we don't know. I don't think Eusebius got it wrong. He was a very good scholar, so there probably is evidence, if only it is looked for. The tomb discovery was remarkable enough, but what researchers found next would add an entirely new dimension to the story, one that nobody saw coming. The garden revelation. In 2022, 6 years after the tomb was opened and resealed, a team led by Professor Francesca Stasola from Sapienza University of Rome,
Archaeologist Dr. Francesca Stasola.
The excavation in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has allowed us to rediscover the long history of Jerusalem.
began restoration work beneath the church floor. Their goal was straightforward: preserve the ancient structure's foundation and document any findings. Archaeological work in and around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is always significant because every layer reveals something new about the site's long history. But what this team discovered went far beyond expectations. As they carefully excavated beneath the church floor, they found something that shouldn't have been there, something that had been hidden for 2,000 years. A garden, not the remains of a garden or traces of where a garden might have been, an actual preserved garden with intact soil, seeds, and plant material. The preservation was remarkable. Behind layers of rock and compacted earth, protected from air and moisture for millennia, the garden had remained frozen in time. The soil still contained olive pits, grape seeds, and other organic material in such pristine condition that researchers could identify exactly what had been growing there. Pollen grains embedded in the soil provided additional evidence, tiny particles that offered a direct link to the flora of the first century. But this wasn't wild vegetation that had somehow taken root in an ancient space. The garden had been deliberately cultivated. Researchers found organized planting beds bordered by stone walls, evidence of careful design and ongoing maintenance. Olive trees and grapevines had grown in specific areas, arranged with intention. Someone had created this garden with purpose, tending it regularly, using it for more than just food production. The layout suggested cultural or spiritual significance, possibly a place for reflection, prayer, or ritual. The presence of tombs directly beneath the garden added another layer of mystery and meaning. Why would someone maintain a cultivated garden directly above burial sites? In ancient Jewish culture, gardens near tombs weren't uncommon, but they held deep symbolic value. Gardens represented life, renewal, and divine blessing. Placing them near burial sites created a powerful contrast between death and life, loss and hope. The garden discovered beneath the church wasn't just ancient landscaping. It was a sacred space, designed to honor the dead while celebrating the continuity of life. The rock-cut tombs found beneath the garden are thought to be among the oldest discovered in the area. Their design matches exactly what archaeologists would expect from first-century elite burials, carved directly into limestone, with multiple chambers, built to house family members over generations. These weren't simple graves hastily dug into earth. They represented significant investment, both financial and emotional. The families who commissioned these tombs expected them to serve as permanent resting places, visible markers of their legacy. That such tombs existed directly beneath a cultivated garden, and that both survived intact for 2 millennia, is nothing short of extraordinary. But the real shock came when researchers compared what they found to what's written in the Gospel of John. In John 19:41, describing Jesus' burial, the text states, "Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid." For centuries, scholars debated this detail. Was John speaking literally? Was there actually a garden at the crucifixion site? Or was this metaphorical language? The discovery settled the debate. The garden was real. It existed in exactly the location John described, near the crucifixion site, containing tombs cut from rock. This wasn't theological imagery or symbolic narrative. It was historical fact, documented in the Gospel, and now confirmed by archaeology. Critics of the Bible have long argued that many Gospel details are embellishments, spiritual truths dressed up as historical events. They've suggested that the Gospel writers used symbolic language to convey theological meaning without intending to describe actual locations or events. But here was physical evidence that John's account was precise. He wasn't writing metaphor. He was recording what he saw. The garden, the tomb, the location outside the city walls. All of it matched the archaeological findings detail for detail. This discovery does more than validate a single verse. It demonstrates that the Gospel writers were far more historically accurate than critics have acknowledged. If John got this detail right, what else did he get right? How many other elements dismissed as symbolic are actually literal descriptions of real events? The garden's preservation raises its own questions. How did it survive? Why wasn't it destroyed or built over like so much else in Jerusalem's tumultuous history? The answer brings us back to Hadrian and his temple. When Hadrian built over the site in AD 135, he didn't just cover the tomb. He buried everything: the garden, the tombs, the surrounding area. His construction crew dumped fill material over the entire location, sealing it beneath layers of stone and earth. What was meant to erase Christian memory became the very thing that preserved it. The garden remained untouched, protected by Hadrian's temple, and later by Constantine's church built on the same spot. For nearly 2,000 years, it sat hidden, waiting for someone to dig deep enough to find it. Now it's been uncovered, and its existence forces a reckoning with the biblical text that many never expected to face. But the garden discovery is only part of the story. When researchers examined it closely, they found 6 specific elements that directly confirm details in the Gospel accounts, creating a web of evidence so tight. 6 biblical confirmations.
The new discoveries here at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre happened during a recent restoration around the tomb.
Beneath the marble floors of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem lies a discovery that has stunned archaeologists, historians, and believers alike. A garden and rock-cut tombs that align with extraordinary precision to the Gospel accounts of Jesus' burial. The first confirmation of authenticity is the site's location. John 19:20 and Jewish burial customs dictate that executions and burials occur outside the city walls to maintain ritual purity. Archaeological mapping confirms that the church sits just outside Jerusalem's ancient walls, in precisely the area where the crucifixion and burial would have taken place. This detail demonstrates that the Gospel writers had intimate knowledge of the city's geography and customs, making the location more than coincidence. It is a practical confirmation of the narrative. The second confirmation comes from the tombs themselves. Matthew 27-60 describes Joseph of Arimathea's tomb as newly cut from rock, never previously used. Archaeologists found rock-hewn tombs carved deliberately with iron tools, shaped with geometric precision, reflecting skill, labor, and wealth. These were commissioned tombs, not natural caves or repurposed burial spaces, matching the Gospel's description of a tomb provided by a wealthy man. The craftsmanship confirms that this was no ordinary burial site, but a place befitting someone of significance, aligning precisely with the biblical account. A third confirmation is that the tombs were hand-cut from solid rock, as Mark 15:46 emphasizes. The limestone chambers show clear tool marks and careful shaping, marking them as premium burials for elite individuals. In first-century Jerusalem, such effort was reserved for those of social and economic prominence, and the tombs beneath the church meet this standard. The Gospel's emphasis on the rock-hewn nature of the tomb is thus validated by physical evidence, showing that the writers described a real, tangible site, not a metaphorical or symbolic space. The fourth confirmation is the tomb's proximity to Golgotha, enabling the urgent burial required by Jewish law and Sabbath restrictions. Mark 15:42, 4, 7. The garden's location allowed Joseph of Arimathea to act swiftly, burying Jesus before sundown without logistical delays. The site's accessibility reinforces the historical plausibility of the Gospel timeline, showing that urgency and location were carefully aligned. This alignment between geography and narrative supports the idea that the Gospel writers were recounting real events at real sites. The fifth confirmation lies in the garden itself. Archaeologists identified remnants of olive trees and grapevines, plants imbued with deep biblical symbolism. Olive trees signify peace and divine blessing, while grapevines represent covenant, abundance, and spiritual nourishment. Their presence indicates intentional cultivation consistent with sacred gardens in ancient Jewish culture, connecting the physical space to theological themes. The vegetation was not random. It reinforced ideas of life, renewal, and divine promise. The garden was therefore both functional and symbolic, reflecting the spiritual significance described in the Gospel of John. The sixth confirmation comes from an unlikely historical actor, Roman Emperor Hadrian. Around AD 135, he sought to suppress Christianity by constructing a pagan temple over the site. In attempting to erase Christian memory, Hadrian inadvertently preserved the tomb and garden beneath layers of fill and construction. This burial protected the site from further damage, ensuring that the tomb and garden survived centuries intact. That Hadrian targeted this specific location also indicates that Christians of the 2nd century recognized it as sacred. His efforts to destroy it became a form of preservation, offering modern archaeologists a remarkably intact site to study. Taken together, these 6 confirmations, geographic accuracy, newly carved rock-cut tombs, hand-hewn rock construction, proximity for urgent burial, symbolic vegetation, and preservation by Roman authorities create a compelling case for the site's authenticity. Each piece of evidence independently aligns with the Gospel narrative, and together they form a convergence of history and text rarely seen in archaeology. While no evidence can definitively prove that Jesus was buried here, the multiple confirmations dramatically strengthen the plausibility of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre as the authentic site. For scholars, such alignment between physical evidence and historical text is exceptional. For believers, the discoveries provide a tangible connection to events that shaped Christianity. The garden and tomb are not merely archaeological finds, they are portals through which the past communicates with the present, and experience elements of a narrative that has been central to human history for 2,000 years. The implications extend beyond theology into the study of ancient texts, culture, and historical methodology. The alignment of tomb design, geographic location, and botanical selection illustrates that the Gospel writers either witnessed these events firsthand or accessed highly accurate contemporary knowledge. The site demonstrates that faith and physical evidence can coexist, providing both a spiritual and historical framework for understanding the resurrection narrative. Moreover, the discoveries raise questions about other biblical sites long dismissed as legendary. How many accounts previously considered metaphorical might, in fact, be historically accurate? How many details in Scripture reflect true knowledge of geography, law, and custom? These questions challenge modern assumptions and encourage a re-evaluation of ancient texts as credible historical sources. Beyond scholarship, there is a profound emotional resonance to these discoveries. The garden and tomb were deliberately preserved, sealed beneath centuries of stone and soil. For nearly 2,000 years, they lay hidden, yet untouched, awaiting the moment when modern eyes could uncover them. This timing is almost providential, emerging in an era when scientific materialism and skepticism often overshadow faith. The discoveries remind us that history can surprise us, that tangible evidence can affirm long-held beliefs, and that the past continues to speak to us in ways both unexpected and transformative. Whether or not one accepts the spiritual significance, the garden and tomb beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre provide undeniable evidence that the Gospels describe a real place, prepared and preserved in alignment with the biblical accounts. In this convergence of archaeology, history, and faith, we are reminded that some stories are rooted not just in belief, but in the enduring reality of the world itself. Beneath the stones of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, history and faith collide. The tomb, the garden, the ancient burial bed, they are real, tangible, and preserved across 2,000 years. But for every answer uncovered, new questions emerge. How many other truths remain buried, waiting for the right moment to be revealed? And when they are, how will they challenge everything we thought we knew about the past and about ourselves? The story is far from over, and the stones are only beginning to speak.